Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our Keeping Us Engaged Student Perspectives and Research Based Strategies on What Works and Why Stylus Author webinar. My name is Patty Webb, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Stylus Publishing. Stylus webinars bring you direct access to our authors and their latest titles. Today, I'm happy to introduce author Christine Harrington. Christine Harrington has worked in higher education for over 20 years. She is an associate professor and co-coordinator of the ED program in community college leadership at New Jersey City University. Previously, she was at Middlesex County College as a professor of psychology and student success and director of their Center for the Enrichment of Learning and Teaching. She has authored numerous books on teaching, learning, and student success, including Designing a Motivational Syllabus and Dynamic Lecturing, both with Stylus. Her latest book, Keeping Us Engaged, was launched this month, offering faculty practical research-grounded strategies to engage students. Written with 50 student voices, this book shows readers how a professor's actions can result in changed attitudes, stronger connections to others and the course material, and increased learning. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much, Patty, and thanks to all of you for carving out time out of your, I'm sure, incredibly busy days. I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I'm just so excited because this just came in the mail yesterday, so I got to touch it, and I'm so glad we have actual real books still. I love reading online, but getting a physical copy of a book is really a lot of fun. And I have, as Patty mentioned, I've written several books on teaching and learning and student success, but this book is really one of my favorites because having the student stories, it is just so inspiring. So I hope that you're going to really enjoy today's session. So let me begin with a quick story about why I wrote this book. I was at Middlesex County College wearing my Teaching and Learning Center director hat. And actually one of the last event that I actually did there before I ended up shifting positions and moving over to New Jersey City University to co-coordinate and teach in their doctoral program in community college leadership. The last event that I did was a student panel, and students did such an awesome job at sharing their perspective, kind of giving us a window into the learning world through their lens. It was so captivating, and there was like a giant line of faculty waiting to hear more from the students, wanting to talk to them afterwards. And I thought, we need to put this out there in writing. So I leaned on my network. I pushed out to several different listservs and tapped some people on the shoulder and said, can you help me identify students from all different kinds of institutions, community colleges, four-year schools, public, private, elite, Ivy Leagues, everywhere, undergrad, graduate. And I have such a wonderful mix of students, a great diverse student body that has contributed to this book. So I want to share with you today the agenda. We're going to talk about several issues, and we are going to go a little fast because we only have an hour. I want to give you as much of the book as I can. Obviously, I can't give you their full stories, and I can't give you all of it in an hour, but I think you're going to walk away feeling like you have a good sense of what this book is all about, and hopefully you're going to want to go and read those student stories and the research support and all for the strategies that they share. So we're going to talk about 5 different areas. Engaging students on the first day of class, connecting students with students in and outside of the classroom. So that's really about the professor-student relationship, powerful teaching strategies, meaningful assignments, and feedback. Now, interestingly enough, when I went out there, I gave students some potential ideas about what they could talk about, but getting all of their stories and then really kind of pulling that together and finding an organizational structure for them was a bit of a challenge, but it was a really meaningful, part of the process. So I'm so glad that I just heard all of these really rich stories from students, and I can't wait to share them with you. Okay, so the first one we're going to focus on is engaging students on the first day of class. And I'm sure we all know how important it is to foster a sense of belonging. And we also want to develop knowledge and skills on that very first day. So let's begin by talking about the sense of belonging. The first story I'm going to share, some of the stories I share with you will be written excerpts from what students have shared, and I will also utilize some videos as well. As Stylus has indicated in the chat, if you do have any questions, the best place to put them is in the Q&A because we will be chatting in the chat. But if you put it there, we'll try to pay attention to it there as well as we go along. So the first one I'm going to have you do is just kind of take a minute to read this first story by Rosalind. Sometimes it's really simple strategies, getting to know a student's name and just a little bit about them. And I know this sounds like a really simple task, but it is not because we have so many students. So I understand how heavy a lift it is, but the impact of that action goes so far with students and really does make a difference. So Rosalind shared a bit about her experience and how wowed she really was by really not just being a number in the class, but really being a student and wanting, her professor wanting to get to know her. Really, really important for us to do. So I know we do lots of different icebreakers. And the first student video story I'm going to share with you is RJ's story. So RJ is in an online class. So you have an online example of an icebreaker that his faculty use. So let's go ahead and listen to RJ.
One online icebreaker that was particularly effective for me was when the professor asked us first to review the syllabus and then identify one topic on the syllabus that interested us most and why. So then we got into an asynchronous discussion online about what interested us. And through that, we were all able to find common ground to move forward. But something actually amazing happened through that conversation. We not only identified what we were interested in and why, but we also revealed our fears about other modules that were coming down the pike. So, not only were we able to find common ground on our interests, we were able to find common ground on our fears. And also, the professor has insight as to what to flag down the line. So, when we get to a certain module, and the professor knows that some of us are a little concerned about it, the professor then can reference the earlier conversation and has prior knowledge to help us maneuver through it. And from that, our fears were reduced and we were able to navigate the assignments more effectively.
So RJ, I think so eloquently shared really the power of that online icebreaker that really just went even deeper than helping them feel comfortable in the class, but also the faculty used that information to address the fears later on in the class. So really excellent example by RJ. And I see Tracy said, that she was the only one that one of her students said had bothered to learn their names. And it seems like such a small task, but it really is so huge and it's so important for us to do. So I want to share with you some research because it is student stories are kind of center stage, but I want you to know that all the stories that they share and the ones that I'm presenting in the book are totally backed up by the research. So here is a study, and I know this particular study was done with high school students and teachers, but I think there's a lot of parallels that we could borrow from in the college setting. And what I like about this particular research study is that it looked at similarities and the purpose and the focus of having that as kind of the heart of the icebreaker. So what they did in this particular study is they had the high school students and the teachers fill out a survey about themselves, kind of like a getting to know you survey. And then students and teachers were randomly assigned to one of two conditions. One condition was that 5 similarities between teacher and student was shared. So this condition was all focused on things that both the teacher and the student had in common. The other group was given information about how they were similar to students in another school. And what you can see here from the results is that in that group that had the similarities between student and teacher, they had better relationships with their teachers, and they also had higher course grades. But something that really stood out to me, even beyond the academic achievement and the benefit of having a stronger relationship, was the equity impact. So these researchers were able to demonstrate that the equity gap was closed by 60%. So when you looked at the Black and Latinx students and the white and Asian students, there wasn't as big of a disparity between their academic performance. So when you think about some really simple strategies that we can use in the beginning of class to get to know our students, and then what do you do with that information? Are you emphasizing and focusing on what you all have in common? I would really recommend that you incorporate that as part of your icebreaker activities in the beginning. Here's going to be our first chat. So I'm going to ask you to jot down some strategies that you use. I know Tracy said she's one who gets to know her students' names. I'm sure many of you do this. What can you do, or what do you do to try to learn that information? So this is a great opportunity for us to learn from one another and share some of those strategies. And Ruth says, thank you for using a non-traditional student. And that's the beauty of this book. You're going to see there's non-traditional age students. There's, the typical 18-year-old, different race, ethnicity, age, geographic diversity. Again, in terms of, elitism, also in terms of the school, public, private, Ivy, community colleges, technical schools. There's a lot of representation. So I hope you appreciate that. That's terrific. Okay. All right, so I'm seeing some different examples coming in. Flipgrid, an online interactive syllabus. Sometimes it's as simple as the introductory emails and, getting them to engage. I mean, RJ's example was not that complicated. It didn't have to be all these bells and whistles. That's great. I'm seeing all these. That's terrific. Posting a bio on the discussion board, right? Padlet, Mentimeter, video introductions. That's really important. Having a face and a name, I think we connect with each other. I know in this Zoom world, it's hard. I can't see all of you now, but I'm loving all this interaction in here. So thank you so much. Just using polls, what matters to you? Who's important to you? Are you an animal lover? Things of that nature to find some of those common grounds. Keep those chats coming. I am, for the sake of time, I'm going to continue along to go on to the next component where we focus on developing skills and knowledge. So on the first day of class, really important for us to create that warm, welcoming, inclusive environment, but we also want them to get into the knowledge and skills. I'm going to share with you this example by Kaylee, who shared about how her faculty member got students really engaged right away with math problems. I'll read this one to you. First day of class in college is normally a long, drawn-out reading of the syllabus. Oh, these things pain me when I read them. However, in my math methods and assessment class, we were immediately engaged with the course content. This course involved exploring different methods of solving mathematical problems and unique ways to assess students on the skills that they learned in the classroom. For faculty looking to create a more engaging classroom environment on the first day of class, I suggest finding an activity that touches on the big ideas you wish to cover in your course to give the students an overview of what's in store for them. You want to create curiosity in your students so they keep coming back to your class hungry to learn more. So again, trying to do an icebreaker that's more discipline specific to your content. I'll give you one quick example. Back in the day when we had real live classes, I would often do a jigsaw classroom exercise on the syllabus. If you're not familiar with the jigsaw classroom, you can go out there and Google it. It's a really cool structure. But the reason why I like that so much is it got them into the syllabus, which is the course content that they're going to be focusing on this semester and the goals and the purpose, but also it oriented them to what a jigsaw classroom looks like. And when you do that, now when I go to use that, which I would do frequently in my class, I don't have to teach them what is a jigsaw classroom, how is this going to work? They've got it all nailed down. So terrific. Great way to get them all engaged right from the start. Now, connecting with students is probably the piece that is most important because relationships matter so much. And it's some of the strategies that we use during class, but also a lot of the strategies that we have to use outside of class. And you are probably very familiar with all of the literature that speaks to the power of relationships and especially the professor-student relationship. It definitely increases motivation, increases confidence, increases learning. There's all these amazing benefits that are clearly articulated out there in the literature. So let's talk about some of the strategies that really spoke to the students, the student contributors in this book. Let's start with getting to know students during class. Let me see, I'm going to go ahead and have you just take a minute to read this one yourself. This is Michael's example of what his faculty member did. So you can see here from Michael's example, it actually kind of crosses both in and outside of class. Inside of class, the professor was using polls to get to know his students. And outside of class, this faculty member would send weekly emails to engage them and would also modify the lecture on the fly to try to incorporate and tap into student interests. A really great way to show that they really matter. And this isn't just kind of a out of the box curriculum, but trying to make it really personalized to the students in that class. Great example by Michael there. Now I want to talk to you about outside of class activities, because this is so incredibly important. We're going to begin with a video, and this is Sarah. So let me go ahead and get to here we go, got to the arrow for you. Oh, sorry, I clicked it by mistake twice. Here we go. I have my chat box right over it. That's my problem. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm a junior at Stockton University, and I'm talking about my preceptor who's at Stockton. We have a preceptor when we start here, and they sort of serve as our academic advisor. They help you with picking your classes, making sure you're on track to graduate. But in my case, my preceptor became a lot more than that to me. She wasn't just a random meeting I had to go to once a semester. She helped me with being more confident in myself, knowing that I had chosen the right major, helping me to develop my writing abilities, pushing myself to take harder courses than I thought. And she did this just through making a personal connection with me. I always felt like I could talk to her, felt like she understood me, she knew what was going on in my life. Even just through asking me a couple questions. If we did a discussion board, she replied with a personal comment. Things like that really went a long way with me, especially when I was a freshman and I met her. And I'm very grateful for that whole experience and having preceptors that Stockton offers.
So I think we've all had students such as Sarah, kind of speak to the power of the, again, a small personalized question to our students really makes a big difference, and, has an impact years later, really powerful stuff. Let me read this one to you. This one's from Joshua. And Joshua, you can see from the title of this one's an individual meeting with a disengaged student. Let me just tell you, Joshua named this, not me. So they all came up with the names. I did not call him or label him a disengaged student. He self-labeled himself that way. So here's what Joshua had to say. In my first semester, I was taking a course that I wasn't particularly interested in. And to make matters worse, it was an early morning class. We all dread those, right? My level of engagement was effectively non-existent. And that disengagement and lack of desire undoubtedly showed in the classroom. If he had never asked me to meet with him in person, I could have easily dismissed even the elevated level of care that I did notice in class as insignificant. Instead, a few minutes of actual conversation made all of the difference in seeing he genuinely cared and engaged me to do exactly the same. So now I couldn't throw the whole story onto the slide, but basically Joshua had missed an assignment or a quiz, an exam, I believe, and he reached out to the professor and expected it to be like a negative situation. And the professor said, come and talk with me. And then he didn't lead with, why did you miss the assignment? He led with, how are you? And, let me hear a little bit of what's going on in your life, and think about the power of that. So oftentimes students are expecting their conversations to be negative based on the baggage they might be bringing and their previous experience with faculty or teachers in the K-12 world. Not to say that they're always that way, but sometimes the come to my office kind of has that you're going to the principal's office feel. Even if that's not our intent, it may be the way that they internalize it. So how we package it and what we say really do matter quite a bit to students. Now, I came across this great article, I believe it was on Inside Higher Ed, where Oakton Community College shared their 15-minute meeting. I'm telling you, I latched onto this because when you look at this data and you hear about what they did, it is so fantastic. I think we all need to do this. So basically what they did is they asked faculty to participate voluntarily in a 15-minute meeting initiative where they asked you, if you wanted to participate, that you would meet with every single student you had for 15 minutes. And I know that's a lot of hours, especially if you're teaching a really big class. This is a community college, so the average class size is probably more in the 25, 30 range. It's not like 400 students. So I do recognize that would be harder to do if you were in that situation. However, if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, what you can see is the overall persistence rate for students at the college, and then the persistence rate if they had even one faculty member who participated in this 15-minute project. Look at the difference. That is huge in terms of their persistence fall to fall. There's not, 15 minutes, people, right? How amazing is that? Now, if you look on the right-hand side of your slide, again, from an equity lens, this has tremendous impact. So what you see here is for their Black students, it really made even a bigger and a stronger difference between those who didn't have that experience and those who did. So again, this 15-minute meeting is a great way for us to engage students. And so much of it is like what Sarah said, just expressing an interest in them. So this isn't about an advising meeting or a structured meeting. It's a how are you meeting, and really important for us to ask that question of our students. In addition to, kind of how are you and the academic question, I want us to pay attention to the value we can add as faculty in terms of their professional network. So you can see here on the slide, and you probably know this, I don't think this is a news alert to you, that some students are less likely than others. In this case, McGuire had noted women and students of color to have high status networks. But what they discovered is once they were given access and opportunity to engage, then they were just as likely as the more privileged students to have high status network members as part of their professional network. So the story here is that when students come to us, especially at the community college sector where I spent most of my career working, they often come not having a strong high-level network. And that's one of the things that education does for students. Yes, they're building knowledge. Yes, they're building skills. Yes, they're building confidence. And all of those are really critical, but they're also building networks. And we don't spend enough time really thinking about the power that we have to help them elevate those networks. Really important. So if you can go ahead, and I see some of you have already kind of jumped in a bit. You may have been answering this question already, but feel free to jump in and share some ways that you have encouraged students, especially those who may not be the typical visitors of your office hours, to come and visit you outside of class, because we need to be strategic. We need to, be pretty intentional about trying to engage students outside of class. I see Jennifer said they're required to do it. So, I think that's important. You build it into your curriculum that's the expectation. I know the other day I was talking to a faculty member who uses class time for this while they're working on a group project. Maybe half the class is like, kind of a one-on-one, series of individual meetings, even if they're 10 minutes each. And that really is important. So I love this. You guys are coming up with great examples. And I'm so glad Stylus is going to share the chats. And I know you guys can share your own chats too if you want at the end. I do think, you want to use the word not office hours. That's my syllabus workshop. I talk a little bit more about what we say on our syllabus. Student hours, call it something that students understand. All of our jargon makes no sense to anyone but us. So we want to be really careful about that. All right, terrific. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the teaching strategies. I had such a hard time picking which ones I was going to talk about today. So you're definitely going to want to go and hear all the other stories that are in the book itself. But today we're going to talk about 3 different ones: making it personal, the power of demonstrations, and the power of collaborative activities. So let's start with making it personal. I'm going to begin with a video, and this is Aditya, who's from Princeton, and he talks about an activity his faculty used on day 1.
Hi, my name is Aditya Shah, and I'm a senior at Princeton studying economics. When I entered the lecture hall for my first day of statistics class, I was only really expecting the professor to go over the syllabus and maybe give us a brief overview of what we were to learn throughout the semester. But to my surprise, my professor, after introducing himself, asked us to fill out a form that he had created. My friends and I thought that it was just an administrative form to get some information about the class, but instead we were asked very interesting questions such as what is our height, how many siblings do we have, or even for us to guess what the average SAT score was in the entire lecture. And so after we filled out the form, our professor explained to us that he's going to use our responses as a data set in order to inform the examples he gives us throughout the semester. And he did so. He used the distribution of the lectures, the number of siblings that each person has in the lecture, as a way to explain the law of large numbers. And he used these examples to illustrate the difference between correlation, causation, and so many other statistical concepts. And I really appreciated this, and it helped me to stay engaged in the class because our professor wasn't using abstract data sets that we had never seen or never even knew of, but he was actually using our data. He was including us into the examples, and that definitely helped me to learn the concepts a lot better.
So making it meaningful, personalized. I mean, the faculty member could have done it obviously without their data, and they could have just done, let me tell you about causation and correlation. But using their own personalized information really made a difference for Adidia, and I'm sure that's the case for the other students in the class too. Demonstrations, now this is kind of getting into my dynamic lecturing one, which is a totally different topic too, but one of the most powerful things we can do is to show, not tell, and to really use lectures as a way to demonstrate different concepts and all. So David is going to share with us how this really helped him in a physics class. So I'll let you listen to him and what he has to say.
Hello everyone, I am David Lant, an aerospace engineering student at Western Michigan University, and the story I shared in Dr. Harrington's book was about the first time I learned what exactly the force of Newton was, and this was during University Physics 1 lecture, and the professor came out with a cart and just handed out lots and lots of these toy apples, which were weighed to be equivalent to the force of 1 Newton on Earth. And it was really enlightening for me to be able to hold in my hand what a Newton felt like, the force of 1 Newton going down my hand. And it was really interesting to be able to visualize something that had previously only been very conceptual, kind of estimating by like what I know how much a kilogram weighs and so on. And then recently, this last fall of 2020, with classes being online during my aircraft structures class, the professor said that he would usually bring like a foam beam. We were learning about beam bending and the torsion and how it affects. And instead, he was able to use a video and pause and then let the students make comments about it to see what they could observe. And it was very enlightening also to see like how a beam bends and distorts, because the equations were they were just very not easy to understand. They were pretty complicated, pretty complex, and being able to see the complexity into action as to what the equations were describing was also very helpful. And now I'm seeing it this semester, the spring of 2021, in my propulsion. My professor has put videos throughout when she talks about the rockets so that we can be able to make these observations of how the rocket is working, and to be able to make us make some observations. So that's the strategies I'm sharing with you guys. Hope you all have a great day.
So David has chock full of great ideas and examples of what his faculty members did. So really, really awesome. Thank you to David for sharing that. And as he mentioned, what we know as experts is like kind of like old hat for us, but for them, it's often complicated and complex material to wrap their heads around. And these demonstrations really do add tremendous value. So definitely encourage you to incorporate those. Here's some of the research kind of behind demonstrations. Kim found that 94% of students who were a part of a class lecture that included demonstrations said they were much more engaged in learning, and their academic achievement increased. So there is a lot of value in using these. So there's a ton of research out there that really supports the use of demonstrations. Now we'll spend a minute talking about collaborative activities. Again, we could spend all day and night talking about this topic as well, but I'll share a couple of the highlights. The first one, I'm going to have you read this example by Edwin. Okay, so you can see here that Edwin really talks about the value of having this collaborative exercise, but you can see there's some pieces here that his faculty member did in a really strategic way. It wasn't just throw students into a group project, but there was a lot of intentionality surrounding this. There was, clear assignments of how they were getting grouped and clustered, and acknowledging who they were and where they wanted to be as a part of that. So that career interest played into it. And then there was also a lot of structure around, asking them to assign different roles and agreeing on rules for the project. So by providing those kinds of, structures and supports for students, it really does help and elevate that conversation. Because we've all also had students who would say a group project was not engaging at all and kind of a disaster. So it really depends on how you structure it. And there is research out there talking about assigning groups, especially when you're talking about an inclusive environment. There's often a student or two who would not easily be pulled into a group if you weren't assigning them. And sometimes there's some evidence that, there's a disparity between the groups if there is self-selection. So having more heterogeneous groups definitely is of value, and faculty can step in to do that. So again, lots of research out there that talks about how collaboration facilitates deep learning, but unfortunately, there's also a lot of data out there that speaks to the fact that we're not doing enough of this. So this was a community college specific survey. If you're not familiar with the sense, it was early on in the year. But here's kind of disturbing that 68% of the students who completed this survey said they never worked with a classmate outside of class. And I do think outside of class work is less likely in community college than the four-year sector, which is very unfortunate. But even the more disturbing part was that almost 1 in 4 said, I never even did this during class. So that is a problem. And I see Stacy jumping in that you're better with that when it's in person versus online. I'm telling you, Stacy, there are so many really great ways that we can do it. If you have a synchronous component, you can do the breakout rooms, as you're probably familiar with, but even asynchronous. I do a ton of group projects, partner projects. Again, it's about providing that structure and space. So I do provide an online group space for all of my online classes so that I can kind of see who's contributing and how it helps with some of that accountability component. So students had a lot to say about assignments. So I do want to spend a little bit of time on this particular part of the book, because I was getting inundated with assignments. Like, assignments really matter to them. And, it depends. Did you give them any choice? Did you give them any structure or guidance? Are your assignments authentic? Did they give them a chance to foster creativity? Really, really, really awesome stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with choice. I'm going to start with Caleb, who is going to talk about how impactful it was for a choice to be integrated into the classroom environment. So let me go ahead and let you hear directly from the student.
In graduate school, I took a course where the professor allowed her students to choose the types of assignments we completed as part of the class. This allowed us to pick assignments that fit with our strengths and future goals. For instance, I chose to complete a research paper because it was the best way for me to focus and share my thoughts and knowledge, and I could then use the paper as a writing sample for future applications or as the start of a publication project. Other classmates may have chosen to do a presentation or a creative media project because those assignments fit with their skills and goals. I really enjoyed having a choice in the type of assignment I completed because I felt more ownership of my learning and how I could demonstrate that learning to my professor.
So to me, choice is one of the best ways that we can be inclusive to all of our students and honor their strengths and values. And I think I think oftentimes we don't give students enough choice. So maybe they get to choose a course, out of a cluster of options. But once they get to the course, their choices are often very limited to maybe a topic for a presentation. But why not have it be much more choice driven? We can accomplish our learning outcomes and determine whether they've been accomplished in a variety of ways. And giving choice to students, like Caleb talked about, really increases their ownership over that project, but B, it also honors their talents and gives them a path forward so they're not kind of boxed into, a one-way only approach. Really important. I did want to make a comment. I saw Valerie had said in community college setting, the complicated nature of our students' lives make it very difficult to have them engage in collaborative projects, what I would say is that because collaboration is so important, that making it a part of class time is a great strategy. But that's one of the strategies that I used in my classes. I started to carve out the last half hour of class was part of their group time, because it did a few things. It eliminated that crazy time barrier that many of them are, single parents and other things, like you said, lots going on. But also it enabled me to be a resource for them while they were working, so they weren't spinning in the wrong direction. I could make sure they were traveling on a path that was going to lead to success for them. So in addition to choice, we also want to give some structure. So let me go ahead and give you an example of what Sarah has to say about structure in the online discussions that she really appreciated.
Greetings, my name is Sarah Lyman Kravitz, and I'm here with a tip for engaging students in an online course. So I took a course with Dr. Susan Goldbeck at Rutgers University Graduate School of Ed. She had very clear and specific directions for how we were to participate in discussion. We had 9 posts through the week, 5 originals and 4 responses to other people. And they needed to be spaced throughout the week. And she was very clear about these instructions. So having to both write our own original posts and respond to other people, and having to do this at intervals throughout the week, kept us engaged in what was happening, kept us aware of what other students were thinking, and quite naturally got us thinking more deeply and more broadly than we would have been on our own.
Excellent. So I did see a question. You can put questions. I'll try to monitor in the chat. It depends on how fast and furious you guys are typing. So I did see one question there that I'll go ahead and address now, but the Q&A function will be a little bit better. I did see some come and go, so I don't know if Stylus already handled them. They might have been more technical questions. So in terms of your question about some examples of how to ensure that there's an evenness in workload. So if you give choices, like how do you know that those are both like equal kinds of choices? I don't think they have to be perfectly matched. And I think that knowing it's a strength of theirs will help. So for instance, the nature of the product, so if you want them to learn whatever A, B, and C, how can they demonstrate that to you? Maybe it's an option of a presentation or a paper or a website or some kind of media plan or something more creative. I think that can really, does it have to, everyone have to do a paper? And actually, as a professor, it's nice to grade a variety of different kinds of things. It is more work to have different rubrics and ensure some consistency in terms of that grading. So I would say you'd want to work with your colleagues in the department to maybe not have all the burden fall just on you, but to do this kind of as a department initiative. Let's relook at our syllabus and see how can we infuse more choice into this. What would allow them? Could it be that they do this reflective journal all semester, or an end of the semester project? There's a lot of different ways to do that, and I see some other folks are plugging in some additional suggestions. So that's terrific if you want to add some others as well. I do have to kind of move on to the next part so we can stay on track. Authentic assignments really matter. So let me give you a chance to read this one by Carrie. So a follow-up note on Carrie, this whole process that she went through actually got implemented, so very awesome. It was great for her to kind of follow up and let me know that the actual change happened. And look at how empowered she was. She really talks about how if I didn't have this assignment, I may not have felt like I could bring my voice to this conversation. So, when we give authentic assignments, it's accomplishing more than just their motivation. It's really building them up. I have another example that I want to share with you. This one is Caitlin. Let me go ahead and let her talk.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Ely, and I graduated from Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 2019. I majored in International Studies and double minored in German and Women's and Gender Studies. Muhlenberg is a liberal arts school, and I was lucky to take a wide variety of classes during my undergraduate career. My most memorable class by far was Psychology of Women taught by Dr. Kate Richmond. In this class, we discussed topics ranging from motherhood, defining gender, first sex, and race through a gendered lens. Our final project was to create new, engaging sexual education curricula for an assigned age group: children, adolescents, young adults, and the aging community. To begin brainstorming, our professor listed 9 topic areas above on a large piece of paper and taped them around the room. The class broke into groups and performed a round robin, writing down everything that came to mind when we read the listed topic area. For an example, under biological, we wrote terms such as the reproductive system, hormones, and puberty. And under the term power, we wrote words such as straight, white, and sexual assault. After 5 minutes, we rotated around the room to read ideas already written and added to that list as well. After collecting peer-reviewed sources and researching already approved sexual education lessons and curricula, we developed and presented our new curriculum to the psychology department of Muhlenberg. My group focused on aging, and we developed a curriculum that addressed menopause, femininity, motherhood, divorce, and sexual intercourse in the aging community. The curriculum for the children cohort, however, looked quite different and focused on reproductive system terminology and puberty. My professor allowed us to explore sexual education in a new way and thinking about what different populations need. The most engaging part of this project was knowing that this curriculum can not only be taught, but can help a lot of people understand their bodies, emotions, and feelings as they age. It was helpful knowing too that while this project was a part of the class, I was creating something that could be used to educate an underrepresented community in the sexual education world.
So another excellent example from Caitlin about the meaning and value of actually creating something that's usable by the community. And I like Robert's comments in the chat about using case studies ripped right from the headlines. Like, make it immediately, connecting it immediately to what's going on in the world is another way to do that as well. So creativity is something else that students really talked about. I actually did not have that as one of the prompts, and they just came in with it anyway. So I adjusted, I think my table of contents took 17 different versions as the stories kept coming in, because I wanted them to really craft the organization of what mattered to them. And the creative assignments were pretty powerful. There's a lot of research that speaks to the benefits of creative coursework. You can see here, Miller found that it increased their confidence in creative thinking, critical thinking, entrepreneurial skills, and networking abilities. Lots going on there. Really, really valuable for us to integrate that. And here is an example by Julie. I'm actually going to read Julie's to you. It's kind of a fun one to read. So Julie said, as is customary, the very first day of children's and young adult literature, Professor Guenta went through the class syllabus: weekly process journal, 4 mini essays, 3 presentations, a larger reflective essay, and a revised final project. Immediately, I jumped to the conclusion that this professor wanted to stuff as much busy work as she could down our throats before we could escape her clutches. It's always interesting to hear how their judgments are of us right on the first day and first few minutes. While I was making this silent judgment, she explained the nature of the final project. We would be writing a summative document, drawing from all the expertise and knowledge accumulated in class. Furthermore, we could pick what type of essay we wished to write. On paper, these 2 statements don't look revolutionary, but they are, because they establish 2 important concepts in my mind. 1, all class material is pertinent to my final goal, and I can guide this project in a personally relevant way. And 2, although the workload did not change, I now believe that the assignments would be meaningful and worthwhile. One recommended format for the final project was the creative essay of a fictional story. I chose this option. So, that's Julie's example. Let's hear another one. Really powerful from Kara. I'm going to let you go ahead and read hers. So Kara really put her, really talked about how her professor was so willing to give students a space to share about themselves, and so positively responsive to who she was as a person. Really powerful for us to remember that we A, learn about our students, and B, create a really safe space for students to talk about all their identities and the intersectionality between their identities. Really powerful point. Now I'm going to have Genevieve share her story about how she discovered her passion.
So my freshman year of my undergraduate studies, I actually was in a course called INQ, or Creative Inquiry, which is the first class you're put into upon entry into my college, and it's meant to introduce freshmen to college life and what college courses are like. So part of this class required a creative project, and quickly I became very engaged with this class because both of my professors made sure to do one-on-one meetings where they would sit down with you and look at you and say, what are your passions? What do you care about? What do you want to change? What kind of things engage you? What kind of things excite you? What kind of things make you nervous, make you fear, make you mad? It was a really personal and effective way to engage students by showing A, that they really cared, and B, allowing for that creative expression that is so important in finding your own perspective as a student, just as a human, and finding your own perspective and passions. And very quickly after this, I became increasingly kind of concerned and wrapped up in this idea of leadership, and I then went on to do a whole project and a study about leadership and happiness and how those two things are correlated. And years later, 3+ years later, I am still working to tutor students and help guide them in this class to help find their own passions and to help find their own perspective, loves, fears, to then build this project that's required of them. So if I could say one thing to professors, it would be to really consider the significance of giving your students the opportunity to of self-expression, really, allowing for this without these harsh rules and guidelines, even if it's not a creative class, allowing for some sort of students' personality and opinions to come through in creative and personal ways, regardless of the class, because that's really important to helping your student find their own perspective and also excel and find interest in any course.
Great advice from Genevieve. I hope that you heed that advice and put it into practice in your classroom. So I do want to hear some of your examples of authentic or creative assignments. I'm going to ask for you to, again, use the chat to jump in with some of those. And as you do that, I am going to move into the next area just because we're a little tight on time. We have about 10 minutes left. And I do have one more kind of like broad topic related to feedback that I want to share with you. So I'm going to jump in, but please do share some of those assignments. I know that you are enjoying, the examples provided from one another as much as the stories you're hearing live in the presentation. So with feedback and engagement, there are 3 things I'm going to zoom in on for today. The first one is formative assessment opportunities and why they matter so much. The second one is giving students a chance to revise their work. And the last one is reinforcing strengths. So we will go ahead and begin by focusing on formative assessment. So formative assessment, as you all know, are the opportunities for students to get feedback on pieces of a larger project, and that's really important. I really came across this article that I was pretty it moved me, it really did move me because Terrace called out this equity issue that I had not thought about before. And I know you're thinking, Christine, there's all kinds of equity issues. There's tons of really significant equity issues, but one that I had not thought about, and basically the claim in this article was that we treat all undergraduates unfairly. And the rationale behind that statement was that we do not give students enough opportunity to learn from feedback in the undergraduate world. If you're a graduate student or you're a professor or a professional, you get more opportunities to learn from feedback. And the example that they shared was like, let's say you submit an article for publication, you're going to get a lot of feedback, maybe more than you even want, and often, not always, you'll get a chance to revise and resubmit. But for undergraduate students, it's often a once and done opportunity. You get one try at a test, one try at a paper, one try at a project, presentation, whatever it might be. We do give feedback, and then we cross our fingers and hope that they'll use that feedback moving forward. So it's important for us to find ways to do that. And Kayla shares one way here. I'll give you a moment to read hers. So as you can see here, this professor really broke down the assignments so that feedback was provided throughout the term. And this really built her confidence and skills and really was very valuable. So we want to try to find ways to increase feedback opportunities, but the way in which we give feedback matters too. And this is a whole nother presentation that I do, but I want to share one research study with you that speaks to the fact that students don't always understand the feedback that we're providing. They are more likely to understand auditory feedback versus written feedback. So sometimes they can't read our writing if it was handwritten, but sometimes they don't even understand what we meant, even if they, let's say it's typed, in this world, we're not handwriting anything, we're typing messages, but they may not understand what we meant by that statement. When you give feedback in a personalized, conversational way, it's a lot easier to explain yourself, and also the affective component is important for us to acknowledge. Feedback often is very emotional, and the way we package it can make a huge difference for students. So we do want to think about A, increasing feedback opportunities, but B, thinking about how we provide that feedback and doing it well. So giving students an opportunity to revise their work is a really good strategy. I have a question, and Robert says, what's wrong with having a one rewrite policy for students, and then you're stopping here and encouraging them to go ahead and rewrite? You can, I would say to you, Robert, if you have them do too big of a project with a rewrite, it can be very discouraging if they poured their heart and soul and hours and hours and hours of work into the project. Whereas I know there are ways that we can easily just do a quick check-in to even see if they're on the right track. So what we're going to talk about right now is the revising, which is really kind of what you're talking about, Robert. And I think that both of these are true. Giving those check-ins and giving the revise opportunities are excellent. So let me share. I'm going to just this is kind of a moment for me because I did get my son, Ryan, to write one up. I couldn't get him to do the video yet. You know how it is with a mom, I'm going to still work on him, but I'll let you go ahead and read his. So what I really like about this assignment and the approach that the faculty member took was that the revision part was built in as part of the process and was graded. And it was an expectation that everyone was revising. So you don't get this message, there's something wrong with me and I missed the mark. It's that revising is a part of what we do. And that is sending a very different message than you have to revise and you're fine. So everyone can improve through this process. And I really like that it was directed at the entire class and was required by all. So two quick strategies I'll share with you. One is, of course, our English faculty friends are really good at the breaking down assignments. If you look at the right-hand side of your slide, doing those check-in points. I think the rest of us can get good at that too and should do more. It doesn't take very long for us to take a quick glance at a reference list to see if they're getting the right foundational kinds of information. It doesn't take us very long to glance at an outline to see if the general structure is good before they spend hours writing it. So really, I think there are some things we can do where we wouldn't have to look at a full draft over and over again, but pieces of it. And the other approach on the left-hand side of your slide is low stakes to high stakes. So the first time they do it, maybe it doesn't get counted at all. And by the end of the semester, it has a higher stake because they got to benefit from the feedback along the way. So a couple of different approaches for you to think about. One last approach I'll share with you before we go to our final topic of reinforcing strengths is to link assignments. So I used to always ask students to do both a paper and a presentation, and they used to be on different topics. But what I discovered is if I put them on the same topic, A, it helps students with their workload, but B, I had them do the paper first, and that prepared them to engage in this group project where they were going to do a presentation on the same topic. So there would, the only problem is 4 or 5 students would have to have the same topic. So every student wouldn't have choice, free range choice of what topic they could have, but they could have choice of, maybe of these 5 or 6 different topics. And I found that really worked well, A, from a feedback perspective, but also B, from a group productivity perspective, because everyone came to the table with value, to bring to the group. They had research, they had done work in this space. Really, really awesome. So the last thing I'm going to mention today is reinforcing strengths. And I'm going to actually let our student tell this story because she does so in a really powerful way. So I'll let you listen to her. This is Christina.
Fun stage of starting to think about post-grad life. Did I want to go to grad school, look for a job, things like that. For a while, I had been leaning towards grad school, but I really didn't have any confidence that I'd be able to get in or even do well if I did get in. But that spring semester in my social psychology class, I had a
Sorry, that was my fault. I clicked on something. Here we go.
I had a professor who was so passionate about what he taught, which is obviously extremely important in engaging students. But more than that, I think the most important point of teaching is motivating. And I'll never forget the kind of feedback he gave on my assignments. It was so positive and so encouraging, and pointed out that I had a natural strength for writing and critical thinking. He commented that my skills could be greatly suited for the field, which gave me so much confidence and motivation to keep improving. Obviously, I was not perfect, but reading those comments made me look at constructive criticism differently too. I thought, okay, he really put in the time to make these thoughtful comments. I am noticed as a student, he sees my potential, and now I really want to get better. So even the constructive criticism became so encouraging, and I really started to see a shift in myself as an academic from that point on. And now I'm in grad school studying social psychology, so it worked.
I love Christina's story. It's so great. And I think we oftentimes are so focused on improving students that our feedback may be more focused on that rather than celebrating what they have already accomplished. So we are at the end of today. We only have 2 minutes left. I do have a question in the chat, so I'll get to look at that in one moment. In the question piece. That's what I tried to click on before, and then the video stopped. So I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But as I read that question, if you can just in the chat, maybe jot down one of your key takeaways from today. Which story inspired you the most? Is there an action that you're willing to take? I would love for you to do that. And while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and just plug up, just put a copy of the book again. I'm just so excited. It came in the mail yesterday, so I'm really happy about that. And let me go ahead and take a peek at the question. All right, so the question is, do you have any ideas for helping faculty who teach large courses and how they can implement more opportunities and using feedback? I'm thinking of those big lecture hall courses that are mostly exam-based. I always recommend implementing formative assessments that can get whole group or self-feedback, but I'm always looking for other ideas to share with faculty. And this is a great question because I think the more students you have, that Terrace claim that we treat undergraduate students unfairly is mostly because we have so many of them and there's only this much of us, and we may want to actually have a few minutes to spend with your family and loved ones outside of class. So, the process of giving feedback is extremely exhausting. So I do have a couple of strategies for you. One is even just giving them rubrics and guidance and asking them to do that self-assessment piece is really powerful because they can even kind of go and check to see, are you on the right track? It helps them know. You can require them to do that and maybe a short reflective statement with it so that you're engaging them in that self-assessment process. You can also do, even in a large lecture class, you can get them into small groups where they do some peer feedback. This is a little hard to explain very quickly, but I'll just share this cool article I came across by Facey that talked about this conveyor belt model of peer feedback. And what Facey basically said is that don't ask students to give feedback in an entire project. It's really hard for us to even do that as faculty, and students aren't like positioned well to do that. So instead, give students a very specific role. So it might be, if you're assigned to this group, you're the citation police, and you're basically going to read a sentence. And if you think it's not common knowledge or the author's point of view, then there needs to be a citation there, and you put a star next to it if there isn't one. You know, you can have another lens that's going through where you ask them to highlight, what do you think the main topic sentence is of this paragraph, so they can kind of get a sense of what the organizational structure looks like from the reader's point of view, you know, and so on and so forth, depending on what your project is. But if you have students with this very more focused lens, and you can do this online as well as in person, and then it cycles through, you know, 3 or 4 people, they're getting much more valuable feedback. So it's not just only relying on you to give that feedback. And then you can also do whole class feedback. So if you ask students to bring in maybe a checkpoint, you may not be able to go over everyone's, but you can put a couple of students up as a model. And generally speaking, a lot of the feedback you provide to one student is probably meaningful and relevant to others as well. You know, and you can put that in writing as well. Like I like to give students, you know, kind of a class announcement about, here's my general observations. Here are the things that most of you were on track with. Here's an example of something that's really on track. And here's something that looked like you guys struggled with, and here's why, and here's what you can do about it. So to provide some of that kind of feedback. So I hope that was helpful. I do know we are at 1:02, so I'm sorry we went 2 minutes over, and I'm sure Stylus wants to get the last word in, so I'll let them go ahead and do that.
All right, thank you again to author Christine Harrington for offering her time and this awesome presentation for our webinar series. And thank you for everyone who turned in live with us this afternoon. If you're interested in ordering Keeping Us Engaged, you can use code KEEP20 to get 20% off the book and free shipping from Stylus Publishing. The webinar video replay will be available tomorrow or Friday, and it will be shared on all of our Stylus social media feeds. And then everyone who has registered for this webinar will also get a direct email with the video link as well. If you have any feedback on this webinar or any requests for future webinars, please feel free to email us directly at stylusinfo@styluspub.com. And I will hang out a little bit longer to let you guys save some of your chats, exchange any information. Again, thank you so much to Christine. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know.
Thanks, everyone. It was so fun hanging out with you. I look forward to hearing from you in the future. If you want to share, you can always send me an email. Let me know how you're engaging your students. Would love to hear from you. So thank you so much. And I hope you all have a fabulous day. You take care.